The Middle East is once again teetering on the brink of a wider conflict, a precarious situation that has drawn in major global powers. The recent cycle of violence began with a decisive and powerful American military operation. On June 22nd and 23rd, the United States launched Operation Midnight Hammer, a series of intense airstrikes aimed at Iran's most sensitive nuclear facilities. These strikes, utilizing massive 30,000-pound bunker-buster bombs, targeted key sites at Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz. President Trump declared the mission a spectacular military success, asserting that Iran's nuclear ambitions had been totally obliterated. These American actions were reportedly coordinated with simultaneous Israeli air raids that worked to disable Iran's air defense systems, clearing the way for the U.S. bombers to reach their targets. Iran's response was swift, though calculated. Tehran launched a retaliatory missile strike, not against Israel this time, but against a significant American military installation, the Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Between 6 and 14 missiles were fired, yet all were successfully intercepted or landed in unpopulated areas, resulting in no casualties or substantial damage. Crucially, U.S. officials confirmed that Iran had provided advance warning of the attack through diplomatic channels, a move widely interpreted as a signal that Tehran sought to make a statement without provoking an all-out war with the United States. This carefully managed retaliation stands in contrast to an earlier, more direct assault on Israel just days before. Israel, for its part, has continued its own military campaign against Iranian assets, refusing to stand down. Israeli forces have intensified their airstrikes, targeting not just military infrastructure but also sites of strategic importance inside Iran. These operations have reportedly struck underground missile launchers, command centers belonging to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and even access routes to the heavily fortified Fordow nuclear site. In a particularly bold move on June 23, Israeli strikes hit the notorious Evin prison in Tehran, a facility known for housing political prisoners and foreign nationals. These overt military actions are believed to be supported by covert intelligence operations from Mossad agents working from within Iran. The situation remains highly volatile, with conflicting signals about what comes next. President Trump has announced a temporary 12-hour ceasefire, suggesting the conflict could be over soon, a claim that has not been echoed by either Israel or Iran. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated that his country is very, very close to achieving its military objectives. The careful signaling from all sides, the U.S. declaration of success, Iran's telegraphed retaliation, and Israel's sense of near completion, suggests a potential, albeit fragile, pathway for de-escalation. However, with so many moving parts and deep-seated animosity, the risk of a miscalculation leading to a larger war remains dangerously high. Beyond the strategic military strikes and political posturing, this conflict is inflicting a severe and growing human toll. The violence has already claimed hundreds of lives. Reports indicate that over 400 Iranians have been killed in the American and Israeli airstrikes, while the earlier Iranian missile barrage on Israel resulted in approximately 24 Israeli deaths and dozens more injured in cities like Tel Aviv. For ordinary citizens in both nations, the reality of war has shattered daily life. In Iran, a civilian exodus from the capital, Tehran, is underway as people flee the threat of further bombardment. The city is grappling with widespread power outages and government-imposed restrictions on social media, cutting people off from information and each other. In Israel, while the direct casualties from the latest Iranian strikes were limited, the constant threat has created a climate of fear and economic strain. The nation is on high alert and the U.S. has begun organizing evacuation flights for its citizens who wish to leave the country. The economic pressure is mounting significantly, with credit rating agencies downgrading Israel's financial outlook due to the heavy defense expenditures and the general instability. This economic fallout compounds the psychological stress on a population that has become accustomed to living under the shadow of regional conflict, but the scale of the current crisis feels different and more perilous than previous flare-ups. Adding to the global anxiety is the threat to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. In a defiant move, Iran's parliament has voted to authorize the potential closure of this vital waterway, through which 20 to 25% of the entire world's oil supply passes every day. While the final decision rests with Iran's Supreme National Security Council, the threat alone is enough to send shivers through the global economy. A blockade would disrupt energy markets on a massive scale, likely causing oil prices to skyrocket and triggering a worldwide economic crisis. The stability of countless nations depends on the free passage of tankers through this narrow strait. Interestingly, despite the gravity of Iran's threat, global oil markets have reacted with a surprising degree of calm. After an initial spike, oil prices actually fell by 7% on June 23, returning to pre-crisis levels of around $65 per barrel. This market behavior suggests that traders and analysts are skeptical that Iran will follow through on a full blockade, viewing it as a move that would invite a devastating international military response and harm Iran itself. This skepticism provides a small measure of relief, but it rests on the fragile assumption that rational calculations will continue to prevail over the impulses of anger and retaliation in a region already engulfed in flames. As tensions escalate, the international community has responded with a chorus of urgent calls for restraint and diplomacy. Leading this effort are China and Russia, both of whom have significant strategic interests in the region's stability. Both nations swiftly condemned the U.S. airstrikes on Iran, framing them as a violation of national sovereignty and a dangerous provocation. Chinese President Xi Jinping captured the global sentiment, stating, "If the Middle East is unstable, the world will not be at peace." Together, Beijing and Moscow have put forward a draft resolution at the United Nations Security Council, calling for an immediate ceasefire, though it is widely expected that the United States will use its veto power to block the measure. China's position is particularly complex. As Iran's largest trading partner and a major importer of its oil, China has a strong economic incentive to prevent a full-blown war. It has offered to play the role of mediator in the conflict, leveraging its economic ties to push for a diplomatic solution. However, its close relationship with Tehran leads many Western nations to view its mediation offers with skepticism, seeing China as a biased party rather than a neutral arbiter. While China has provided strong diplomatic support for Iran, there is currently no evidence to suggest it has offered any military assistance, preferring to protect its economic interests from a safe distance. Other global and regional powers have joined the push for de-escalation. The United Kingdom, the European Union and Pakistan have all issued public statements urging all parties to step back from the brink and engage in dialogue. The focus of these diplomatic efforts is to create an off-ramp for the conflict before it spirals into a catastrophic regional war that would draw in neighboring countries. The International Atomic Energy Agency has also sounded the alarm. Its chief, Rafael Grossi, warned of unimaginable violence if diplomacy fails, especially after Iran's parliament voted to suspend cooperation with the agency, a move that would end international oversight of its nuclear activities. These diplomatic maneuvers highlight a world deeply divided on how to handle the crisis. The United States and Israel appear committed to their strategy of using military force to neutralize what they see as an existential threat from Iran's nuclear program and regional influence. In contrast, China, Russia and many European nations believe that such actions are reckless and that only a negotiated settlement can ensure long-term peace and stability. This fundamental disagreement at the highest levels of global power leaves the region dangerously exposed, with the path to peace obscured by competing interests and a profound lack of trust. The current standoff between the United States, Israel and Iran represents more than just another flare-up. It is a critical juncture that could define the future of the Middle East for decades. The most immediate danger is the potential for a miscalculation that triggers a much larger, direct war. While the recent actions by both the US and Iran have been described as carefully calibrated, the risk of an unintended escalation remains exceptionally high. A single stray missile, a mistaken intelligence report, or a domestic political pressure to appear strong could easily ignite a conflagration that would engulf the entire region, drawing in neighboring states like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iraq. Such a conflict would have devastating consequences that extend far beyond the battlefield. The global economy remains highly vulnerable to disruptions in the Middle East's energy supply. Even if Iran does not close the Strait of Hormuz, a wider war would inevitably impact oil production and shipping, causing a dramatic spike in energy prices. This would fuel inflation worldwide, strain national economies, and could potentially trigger a global recession. The economic stability that the world has fought to maintain is fragile, and a major Middle Eastern war would be a powerful shock to the system, affecting everything from the cost of transportation to the price of food. The crisis also exposes the fragility of international diplomacy in the face of determined military action. Despite widespread calls for a ceasefire from the United Nations, China, Russia, and European allies, the primary actors have so far prioritized military objectives. The potential U.S. veto of a UN Security Council resolution for peace underscores a world where multilateral institutions are struggling to enforce peace when a great power is determined to act unilaterally. This dynamic weakens the international norms that have helped prevent major wars for decades, setting a dangerous precedent for future conflicts in other parts of the world. Ultimately, the path forward is a perilous one, walked on a diplomatic tightrope. The brief ceasefires and carefully worded statements from leaders offer a glimmer of hope that an off-ramp can be found. However, the deep-seated mistrust and conflicting strategic goals among Iran, Israel, and the United States make a lasting resolution incredibly difficult to achieve. The world holds its breath, hoping that these powerful nations can pull back from the abyss. The alternative is a descent into a conflict that would not only devastate the Middle East, but also send shockwaves of instability and economic hardship across the entire globe.